Hello, my fellow fabric fanciers. Today I'm going to show you how to sew with all those eyelet fabrics that you might see in the fabric store that have that beautiful scalloped border on them. I think these fabrics can be absolutely gorgeous, and they can also add a really cool design element to your sewing very, very easily. So I love sewing with them. There are a few things to know about them that you might not have thought about. So we're going to talk about that today and a few things that you should not do when you're sewing with Eyelet. If you don't know me, welcome. I'm Sarai. I'm the founder of Seamwork, and we're the sewing community that's all about helping you make more time to sew. We have hundreds of patterns, resources, and a supportive community over at seamwork.com. So here's what we're going to cover in today's video. How to buy the right amount of fabric so you don't run out, choosing the right pattern for working with Eyelet, how to cut and sew your eyelet so that the seams match up, the best way to finish your edges, and at the end, tons of ideas for using Eyelet. So you've probably come across eyelets in the store, and they're usually embroidered cottons. And you can find them in all different weights, all different styles. They often have a really beautiful scalloped border along one or both sides, and you can use that border, you can use both sides of the fabric to add really cool design details to your sewing. So when I'm shopping for Eyelet, I really like to look for cottons that are kind of fine and thin. And the reason for that is that the embroidery can add a little bit of an extra layer of stiffness to them. So if you're shopping in person, you might want to hold it up and just kind of play around with the stiffness, see how it drapes on your body, see how it looks. If you're ordering online, you might want to get a swatch. All right, so one tip I have if you're sewing with Eyelet and you're planning to use that border, you definitely want to buy extra fabric. And the reason for that is that usually eyelets come in 45-inch widths. You can find them a little bit wider, but usually it's 45 inches. Another tip is to throw out your cutting layout and buy extra fabric. And the reason for that is that the border runs along the selvage of the fabric, so you're probably going to have to move your pieces around. So if you want to have that pretty border on the hem, for example, you'll have to cut your pattern piece crosswise. So you'll definitely need extra fabric. So you can just buy a whole bunch of extra fabric. You can buy an extra yard or an extra yard and a half. Or if you want to be precise, you can kind of lay out your pattern pieces and figure out exactly how much you need. You can bring it to the fabric store and lay it out on the floor there. I'm sure they'll love that. All right, so to show you these tricks for sewing with Eyelet today, I used the Seamwork Pfeiffer pattern, and then I used the Eyelet border both along the hem here and also this ruffle that goes all along the neckline. When I made this, I bought an extra half yard of fabric. It ended up being very close to the amount I needed. I almost ran out, so I would advise always buy a little bit more fabric than you need. Half a yard was probably not enough for me. Next time, I think I'd buy an extra yard. Okay, let's talk about the edges when you're sewing with Eyelet. So the Pfeiffer uses bias tape at the armholes and at the neckline, and that's really perfect for sewing with Eyelet because facings can show through. So bias tape is a really, really nice finish when you're sewing with Eyelet. So if the pattern you're using does have a facing, you can use bias tape instead, or just think about lining the whole thing. Okay, so with this pattern, with the Pfeiffer pattern, the instructions have you creating bias tape from the fabric, which looks fantastic. The thing is that Eyelet doesn't really make great bias tape itself because of all the holes in it. So you can either just use a plain fabric for making your bias tape, or you can just buy pre-made bias tape, which is what I did. Another really cool time saver when you're sewing with Eyelet is that you don't have to actually hem it because the scallop forms your hem. So I didn't have to hem the bottom of this, and I didn't have to hem this big ruffle. I am not a fan of hemming ruffles. It is long, not fun. So like I said before, the cool thing about sewing with an Eyelet border is that you don't have to worry about hemming, which saves some time. But on the other hand, you do have to kind of think about the placement of those scallops along the hem. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I think it looks best if you can position your seam so that it's right on a convex rather than a concave curve. So you want to position your seam, so I've drawn it in here in red, so that it's exactly at the top of this outer curve. All right, that's all well and good, but you're probably saying to yourself, Sarai, what about the other side? But it is a little bit tricky because if you were to flip this piece over, then on the other side, it might not land in the same spot. So then you have uneven curves. So in other words, you might have it positioned perfectly on one side, but then on the other side, it's on the wrong edge of a scallop. So to fix that, here's what we're gonna do. So instead of cutting on the fold or cutting this one piece and flipping it over, we're gonna cut single layer. That's just gonna give us the most control possible over the positioning of our pieces. So to do that, I've traced the entire piece out onto a separate piece of paper, and you can see I've mirrored it. So we have the whole top right here. Now what I can do is I can position this so it's centered, and so that it's mirrored on both sides, and I can check and make sure that it's landing at the top of a scallop. You can see here that it's not quite landing at the very top of the scallop. It's kind of almost like halfway down the scallop. So in that case, what I'll do is I'll just redraw this side seam a little bit so that it does land at the top of the scallop. And that will change the shape just slightly of your final side seam, but that's okay. I think that's preferable to having seams that look a little bit wonky. All right, so that's the cutting part. Now let's get into the sewing part so that that side seam looks pretty. So sometimes what can happen with sewing these side seams is that even if you cut it in the way I just explained, the little seam allowances, because of the scallops, they can kind of poke out and it doesn't look that neat or tidy. You can see here they're sort of poking out on the bottom here. Now if you cut it the way I just explained, that'll be minimized, but even if you do that, sometimes that can still happen. So here's a little trick. What I'll do is I'll press the seam open and then I'll just kind of fold that seam allowance a little bit out of the way and then quickly just bar tack it in place. And that'll give a nice tidy edge. Even if you have that seam allowance poking out a little bit, you can fix it. I've been thinking a lot about sewing with Eyelet. So here are a whole bunch of ideas for you. All right, so first, obviously you can use them for hems like I did on the Pfeiffer. You can use it for dress hems, for shirt hems, for sleeve hems. You can use the borders for ruffles, again, like I did on the Pfeiffer here. You can cut the border off and then use it as a cuff on a shirt. You can sandwich it into vertical seams. You can also sandwich it between the tiers of a skirt. You can use it along a neckline. I think this looks really cool on a square neckline like the Seamwork Carter. You can line it with a fun color, and you can even use it as an applique like on the center front. All right, those are all my ideas. So now you give me an idea. Leave them in the comments below. I really love the way this eyelet looks on the Seamwork Pfeiffer. I think it came out so beautiful. There are a whole bunch of other patterns that I think you could play with and it would look just amazing, like the Seamwork Carter, which I mentioned before, the Madu, the Mina, and the Benning dress. I think those would be all amazing choices, but there are a lot of other patterns you can play with Eyelet with. So I guess I wasn't out of ideas. One thing you can do is go to the Seamwork website and you can actually filter by garment type, and then you can see dozens of possibilities for whatever kind of garment you're looking for. And if you want access to all these patterns I've mentioned, be sure to check out Seamwork. When you join, you get access to our entire catalog of over 200 modern sewing patterns, from quick and easy tops to wear anywhere dresses to tailored blazers and pants. We help you to design and craft your own wardrobe. Membership also gets you access to Design Your Wardrobe, our popular course that walks you through a process for laying out a seasonal wardrobe that you can sew. Plus, membership includes our library of dozens of sew-along classes, and best of all, access to our private sewing community, including tens of thousands of members, where you can post projects, ask questions, and even find sewing friends near you. I hang out there all the time along with Haley and the rest of the team here at Seamwork, and I'd love for you to join me. YouTube subscribers get half off a Seamwork membership, making it an incredibly good deal. To sign up, just click the button on screen or the link in the description below to claim your offer. I hope you loved this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.